Have you ever met someone who seemed unstoppable? Someone blessed with extraordinary talent, strength, and potential? Someone destined for greatness? Well, the story you're about to hear is about a man exactly like that. A man who could defeat entire armies by himself. A man whose name made his enemies tremble. A man chosen by God before he was even born. His name was Samson. But despite all his strength, Samson had one weakness that nearly destroyed him. This is the story of Samson.
Long before Samson was born, the people of Israel were suffering under the rule of the Philistines. Life was difficult. The Israelites cried out to God for help. One day, an angel appeared to a woman who had never been able to have children. The angel delivered an incredible message. She would give birth to a son. This child would be set apart for God's purpose from birth. As a sign of this special calling, his hair was never to be cut. The child would grow up to begin rescuing Israel from its enemies. Soon, the promised child was born. His parents named him Samson. And from an early age, God blessed him in extraordinary ways.
As Samson grew older, it became clear that he was unlike anyone else. The Spirit of God would come upon him, giving him supernatural strength. One day, while traveling alone, Samson encountered a roaring lion. Most people would have run away, but Samson stood his ground. With nothing but his bare hands, he defeated the lion. Word of his strength began to spread. People were amazed. Enemies were terrified. Samson became known as the strongest man in the land. But strength can be dangerous when it leads to pride. And unfortunately, pride was beginning to grow inside Samson's heart.
The Philistines ruled over Israel and treated God's people harshly. Samson constantly fought against them. On one occasion, he defeated many Philistine soldiers single-handedly. Another time, when enemies tried to trap him, he broke free as if the ropes around him were nothing more than threads. Again and again, Samson won impossible victories. The people celebrated him as a hero. But Samson began relying more on his strength than on God. And that would eventually lead him into trouble.
One day, Samson fell deeply in love with a woman named Delilah. The rulers of the Philistines saw an opportunity. They knew they could never defeat Samson through force. So they decided to use deception. The Philistine leaders secretly approached Delilah. They offered her a large amount of money. All she had to do was discover the secret of Samson's strength. At first, Samson refused to tell her. Several times she asked. Several times he gave false answers. But Delilah continued pressing him day after day. Eventually, Samson grew tired. His judgment became clouded. And he made the biggest mistake of his life.
Finally, Samson revealed the truth. He told Delilah that his hair had never been cut. His uncut hair represented the special promise between him and God. That night, while Samson slept, Delilah carried out her betrayal. She called for a man to cut Samson's hair. As the locks fell to the ground, the symbol of his dedication was removed. Then Delilah shouted, "Samson! The Philistines are here." Samson woke up and assumed he could escape like every other time. But this time was different. His strength was gone. For the first time in his life, Samson was powerless. The Philistines captured him. The mighty warrior had fallen.
The Philistines celebrated their victory. They mocked Samson, humiliated him, and threw him into prison. The man who had once been feared by nations was now a prisoner. Day after day, Samson sat in darkness. Alone. Broken. Defeated. He had lost everything. His freedom. His reputation. His strength. But during those long days in prison, something important happened. Samson began thinking about God again. He realized how far he had drifted. He understood that his strength had never truly come from himself. It had always come from God. And slowly, his hair began to grow again.
Months later, the Philistines organized a massive celebration. Thousands gathered inside a huge temple. The rulers wanted to show off their greatest trophy, Samson. They brought him into the crowded building. People laughed at him. They mocked him. They pointed and celebrated his downfall. But they failed to notice one thing. Samson's hair had grown back. More importantly, his faith had returned. Standing between the temple's two central pillars, Samson prayed. Perhaps the most sincere prayer of his entire life. He asked God for strength one final time. Not for glory. Not for fame. Not for revenge. But to fulfill God's purpose. God answered. Strength flowed through Samson once again. He placed one hand on each pillar. The crowd continued laughing. No one understood what was about to happen. Then Samson pushed. The pillars began to crack. The temple shook violently. Panic spread throughout the crowd. And with one final effort, Samson brought the entire structure down. The Philistine leaders were defeated. Israel's enemies suffered a crushing blow. Samson died that day. But through his final act of faith, he completed the mission God had given him.
The story of Samson is not really about physical strength. It is about the danger of pride. It is about temptation. It is about poor choices and painful consequences. But most importantly, it is about redemption. Because even after Samson failed, God did not abandon him. And even after losing everything, Samson found his way back. His story reminds us that our greatest strength does not come from muscles, talent, money, or success. True strength comes from our relationship with God. And no matter how far we fall, God can still restore us when we turn back to Him. That is the story of Samson. A man who lost everything, yet found God's grace in the end.